Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and today I'm in the greenhouse. That is a wooden hand-painted Christmas tag that I found walking home from school in 2nd grade. And it says on the back, "To Rax, love from somebody." Anyway, but I've kept it ever since because I thought it was incredibly cool, and it's been on our advent calendar for a very long time because a lot of the stuff that's on here either has sentimental value or is just plain cool, which was the whole point. So, and every day in December we will take turns putting another one of these guys on here to mark the passage of days. That sounds dramatic, doesn't it? These little teeny guys here, some of those are Hallmark ornaments. Back when Hallmark used to make the miniature ornaments that were the just absolutely most beautiful things ever. And now they're just sad. That's the best way to put them, because they're clunky and big and stuff. And it was back when miniature Christmas trees were very in, and so I have a small collection of those. I need to make sure I've got enough of the balls on here too. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means we need 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are very cool. Some of these are very old things, like my tag. These are actually buttons, but we love gnomes, so I added that. This is a Hallmark ornament. Probably that one, that one, that one, that one. This is a old Christmas tag sort of thing. This is a star that was sold as a fundraiser for a women's craft group somewhere, I don't know, Africa or someplace else that did stuff. And I like to use things like that for the star because it's kind of a, you're doing some good while you're enjoying your own stuff. But there it is. It's all ready to go. Oh, and this is a tiny little gnome that I made. Gosh, I don't know. I can't begin to guess how many years ago. Probably when the kids were babies. And the babyest kid now is 40, so, it's just a little, is it a hemlock cone?
Hemlock.
Yeah, it's just a little hemlock cone that I put a little face and a little hat on. And I love miniature things, always have, so that was perfect. Almost done. I need to find my lights, because I string a thing of battery-powered lights over the top. And it'll be all ready to go. Here we have another thing of, these are cabbage, aren't they? Yep, they are cabbage. And aside from the leaf that fell on them, they're looking pretty good. And this is funny. I don't know whether that was a piece of, this is not a bite. It's actually like a weird thing on the edge of the leaf. Strange things happen sometimes when plants are growing. Garlic. Those are hardneck Germans. These are elephants. Those are elephant. Okay. Now, let's talk about the tomatoes. They look a little fried. However, you'll notice there's still quite a bit of fruit on here. And what I have seen in the past is that the plants are not completely dead. They still have green on the vines.
There are still some moderately untouched sections, and they will work very hard to turn those tomatoes into something edible. Now, the plant doesn't look great. And I'm getting some things like this. This little guy I will harvest in the next day or two. And when I get done with him, I will probably cut this branch back. I might cut it back to here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get, I have to take a look because this is a good looking shoot here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a couple of good shoots that I can cut off of Amanda Orange that are not in ratty condition. We already have some that I showed you before that's already in water. And the Amanda Orange is probably the yuckiest of that batch. What I did this morning just a little bit was I came through and cut off some of the branches that have no fruit, no nothing. And I'm not going to encourage them to grow fruit at this point. If they have blossoms on them, like for instance here, Big Beef. This has got some blossoms right here. The chance that that is going to bring any fruit to edible stage is like 0. But you see this? That's a decent looking shoot right there. It's a sucker. And suckers will grow up to be entire plants. So what I will probably do, because I only had a few minutes this morning to do this, so I will probably come through again each day, and like this, there's no fruit on here, chop. This, there's no fruit on here, chop. Like I said, I didn't have much time this morning to work on it. But I will go through all of these plants like that and see what I can get. Like on this Gardener's Delight, now we really don't need any more Gardener's Delight. We already have enough of those. But look, that is a perfectly wonderful looking harvestable piece of green tomato. Not a darn thing wrong with it. And there's another one here. This is on, that's on a Granadero. So we're going to experiment to see what we can do with this. If I didn't have to start any Gardener's Delight or Granadero or Big Beef or Amanda Orange next spring, and if I could just literally keep them as shoots all winter and then plant them up into pots when I wanted them, how cool would that be? I don't know if it's possible here because we don't have a really climate controlled environment, but heck, we're going to give it a try. Worst case, it's a giant fail and we won't do it again. But we also know that if it was a real desperation situation, like there were no seeds available and we needed seeds and stuff like that, we could do that, but keep them in the house where we can control things more carefully. Because we have a limit out here. If you remember, all we're doing here is I took canning jars and I plopped the cut off pieces into the canning jars. There's water up to the top here, and they're sitting in a tub of water. Now, the reason they're sitting in a tub of water is because that gives me a lot more ability to control the temperature in here, because this becomes a heat sink. That is nice. That's like barely lukewarm water. And when it comes time to shut the place down in the evening, which will be in another hour or so, I'll start shutting it down. I will put this, dome over the top, and then I will cover the whole thing with plastic. That gives me 2 layers of plastic between those plants and the inside of the greenhouse. And I have a heat mat under there. Now right now this says it's 82 degrees because it's been in the sun, so it's actually not heating. You can tell if it's heating or not by the, see, the power is on. That red light there says power, but heating. It's not actually heating. It's actually hotter than it's supposed to be right now, which is fine. It's not going to hurt anything. We're not talking about 120 degrees here. We're talking about 82. So the water is actually a smidge warmer. But even if we lost power, that 82 degree water is going to really, really make a huge difference in terms of keeping those tomatoes warm all the way through the night. Years ago, lots of people used to build greenhouses, and they would take every kind of container they could think of just about, and they would line the inside of the greenhouses with the containers, and they'd paint them black, and during the day they would absorb, and they fill them with water, and during the day they would absorb heat from the sun, and then it would come off of them during the night and help to warm the greenhouse. Now, it still works. It's just basic physics. These barrels do emanate heat all night, and that's one of the reasons that this end of the greenhouse stays just a smidge warmer. Also, the heater that we do have that we run during the coldest part of the night, right there, and you can see it's a little guy. You know, the big guy has not been fixed yet. We're still missing a part, and now is not the best time in the history of the world to be looking for parts. So we need to get that worked out. That little heater is enough to keep most of the greenhouse frost-free. We're not trying to keep it 80 degrees, 70, 60, 50, 40, as long as we don't get frost in here. Now, the other day when I came in, I don't know if the inside is wet right now. I know it's not. I could actually, sometimes when the heater's been running and it's gotten really toasty in here, you get condensation on the inside of this plastic. And when I came out in the morning, I could take my finger and scrape the inside with my fingernail and get frost. Not the ideal situation, but the process of that water going from water to ice requires a lot of energy. That means it took the cold air on the outside a lot of energy effectively to get into our greenhouse and do any damage in here. And as you can see, most everything is very happy. We have very little damage. We had basically one basil plant that got fried back there, and yeah, the tomatoes were damaged. The ones that were worst damaged, in fact, I actually brought one of them. I restrung one of them this morning. I moved one of these. I forget which one it was. I can't tell right now. One of them was actually leaning against the outside wall. Well, that's the worst thing you could possibly do. That little teeny line of plastic is not going to do anything to keep that poor little tomato warm enough to not get frozen. I hope you've enjoyed my little tour today. As you can see, we're still doing really darn well in here. Even things like the Thai basil and the peppers and other things that should be being affected by the cold are still doing really well. And honestly, these guys, the brassicas of all different kind and the lettuce, are not heavily affected. The biggest trick for them is I always make sure, if I didn't get out and water in the morning and I got a little drier than it should have, a couple of things were a little wilty when I came out here, that's a no-no. You don't want a plant that is stressed going into a yet more stressful situation. So in the wintertime, I always make sure that sometime during the day, everything gets watered or checked for water. You do not want your plants stressed in any way. You want them as healthy as possible so that if they do get hit by frost, there's as little damage as possible. And even your more tender plants will have a better shot at life, basically, if they're fully hydrated. It's just like us. If we're climbing a mountain and we're not fully hydrated, we could get into trouble. So give them the best shot they've got. It's no different than in the summertime. In the summertime, when it's going to be wicked hot, I water everything well. They're chugging along, trying to take up the water, and they can only take it up so fast. There are other things you can do. If you live someplace where you can afford to spray water, you can actually spray water to cool plants down. I hear from people in Georgia that in the summertime, when they get really, really hot weather and everything is just like falling over practically, they will literally get out there with a big agricultural sprayer and spray everything. We can't afford to do that because water is a precious commodity here. But what we will afford to do sometimes is we will afford to run the fan down there with water. And what that allows us to do is cool this whole area down a lot farther than if we were just running a fan. Because water in a dry environment like that, the air is being pulled through a filter that's soaked with water. It's called a swamp cooler, and it's an evaporative cooler. The water is evaporating, it's lowering the temperature of the water, and then you blow that, the air, and then you blow that air in here. Simple. Not the cheapest thing on the planet because you're using both water and electricity, but it can make the difference between not being able to grow in here at all during the summertime and being able to grow. And we're finding out that a lot of people just plain quit growing in the summertime in other parts of the United States. And I'm like, that's fascinating, because if ever there was an area that shouldn't be able to grow in the summertime, it would be us. But we found that putting shade cloth on the greenhouse, or row covers even, and we found the row cover actually works better than the shade cloth does, because the shade cloth doesn't have the shade cloth that we have, which was just designed for shading people. It really wasn't designed for shading a garden. Does not create the most ideal lighting conditions. Plants need certain types of light in order to function properly. That's why when you use fancy grow lights, it'll talk about the spectrum of the light. And we found that the spectrum of the light coming through the row covers like this, that they're designed to be used on veggies, is fine. The plants just say, oh, there's less light, but they're not bothered by the fact that there might be a particular color missing from that light. Whereas the guys down there actually don't like it as much because they just have regular row covers. I mean, a regular shade cloth. And I think in the future we will switch 100% to row covers because they've held up well. We have 2 panels that are now slightly torn. We also had some really, really high winds. So that's not shocking. But they've held up well enough, and it has made a big enough difference, both in terms of cutting the light when we don't need so much, like in the summertime, and in terms of insulating the greenhouse just that little bit extra in the wintertime. So that was kind of an experiment. We thought about it, and it made sense, so we did it, and it seems to have worked. So, is it ideal? Oh, heck no. Ideal would be double-walled greenhouse, or what do they call that stuff? Solar wrap?